And welcome to part 2 of session 8, where we're continuing to look at mindfulness and its relation to managing and understanding anxiety. Okay, so one of the skills we're going to learn and develop here is what's the difference between possible or probable. Very often anxious thoughts are about what is possible, whereas probable thoughts tend to be more rational about what actually could happen. Now, whilst we recognise that almost anything is possible, not all possibilities are likely to happen. And anxiety can lead to ruminating on every possible future outcome, however unlikely they might be. So we're going to be doing a little short practice in a moment, which will enable us to refocus on the probable. And the aim of this practice is to help us reduce rumination and to put catastrophic thoughts into their true perspective. Now, the steps to the practice are to separate the possible but unlikely from the probable. And what do we mean by this? Well, let's look at a few examples of what this could look like. So it's possible that the kids will get distracted and they'll get hit by a car and all the disastrous circumstances around that. It's far more probable that you stay nearby and watch out for traffic. It's possible that you'll miss a deadline, ruin the project altogether, and end up getting fired. However, it's much more probable that you'll manage your time effectively, you set many deadlines, and the project will be fine. It's quite possible you will have a fight with a partner that will cause your breakup, maybe even losing your house. But it's far more likely that a fight will lead to important discussions and knowing each other better. So what I'd like you to do now is get a piece of paper. It could be your journal or a separate piece of paper. And on a blank page on the left-hand side, write down 3 or 4 anxieties about a personal situation which is disturbing you at the moment. And on the right-hand side, I'd like you to refocus each item into what's actually probable. Now you may want to spend a few minutes on this exercise. You may want to pause the video as we move on to exploring anxiety and mindfulness further. So let's distinguish between feelings. These are emotional states and they align themselves with physical responses in the body. And thoughts. These are ideas, stories, and interpretations of what's happening. It's important to get a sense and an awareness of the difference between these. And let me give you a few examples here of the difference between them. A feeling might be, I'm upset because my daughter and I argued this morning. The thought, we may never get along anymore. Another feeling, I am nervous about getting my son into this important school. And the thought accompanying this might be, his future depends on this outcome. So feelings are very often responses to the situation, and thoughts are what we create. And the reason we're looking at this difference is we're about to go into a guided practice where we're going to be exploring how we might reframe these, how we might understand ourselves better, how we might stay mindful and hence reduce the anxiety in our lives. Okay, and welcome back to our practice. In this practice, we're going to be reframing anxious thoughts. A couple of moments ago, we were looking at the difference between thoughts and between emotions. And in this practice, we're going to be examining some of these thoughts and reframing them so they become less troublesome, less charged with anxiety. Now, we aim to reframe thoughts in order to help us avoid over-identifying with them. We're going to separate out our anxiety feelings from the thoughts and then from ourselves. This helps us to manage anxiety in our lives by maintaining a healthy distance and an awareness separation. During this practice, what we're going to be doing is allowing anxious thoughts to come to your attention. We're not going to try and bury anything or be distracted by anything. And with each anxious thought that comes up, we're going to breathe into it and reframe it. And I'll give you the wording of that reframing in just a moment. The idea is that we will, by the end of this, be far less anxious about situations in our lives. So here are some examples of the reframing that we're talking about here. Okay, your thought might be, I'm afraid this relationship won't last. We're going to reframe this to, I'm having the thought that I'm afraid this relationship won't last. Here's another example. What if I lose my job? And this can be reframed to, I'm having the thought that it's possible I could lose my job. And another example. Where am I going to find the money for these repairs? And that's reframed to, I'm having the thought that there isn't enough money for these repairs right now. So effectively, the thought reframing is just about taking the thought as it is without changing it or trying to fix it or do anything with it, and prefixing it with, I'm having the thought that. And here you can repeat this with one thought over and over again, or many thoughts, whatever is appropriate for you. So we're about to move into this practice, so I'm assuming you can give it your full attention. You're going to be sitting upright in your chair with your hips 2 to 3 inches above the level of your knees. Get your feet flat on the floor. Rest your hands on your lap and don't interlock your fingers. You can close your eyes if you want to, or you can just have a soft downward gaze toward the floor, and without changing it, become aware of your breath as it rolls in and rolls out. Now I'd like you to start this practice by bringing to attention a non-overwhelming situation that causes you anxiety. And notice the anxious thoughts that are there and allow them to find their own language, their own statements. And when you have a thought there to work with, you're going to reframe it by prefixing it with, I'm having the thought that. Now I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes while I allow you to continue with this practice. You can, as I mentioned earlier, repeat it over and over again for the same thought if it's particularly persistent or annoying, or you can have many thoughts associated with a situation that you find anxiety. If you run out of thoughts, you can always move on to a second or a third situation. Either way, I'm going to be quiet for a little while and allow you to do this practice. Now pay attention to where the anxiety sits in your body as you continue this practice. Remember, you can repeat reframing words as often as you need it. And as you continue this process, become aware that anxious thoughts are stories we tell ourselves. They're not who we are. And as we draw this practice to a close, let go of any anxious situations you've been considering. Let go of the reframing process, knowing that you can come back to this as often as you wish to. And become aware of your feet on the floor and the chair you're sitting in. Wiggle your fingers. Take 2 or 3 deep breaths. If you close your eyes during this session, then now is a good time to open them and become aware of the environment that you're in. So let's move on and reflect on this practice. So let's spend some time reflecting on the exercise we've just done on reframing our anxious thoughts. You may have noticed that we're not making any attempt to make them go away. It just helps us to separate the thoughts from ourselves, and as well as separating the thoughts from our feelings. Now, the benefits of this process is that you can see your thoughts more clearly, and when you do that, it enables you to have a look at them. How relevant are they? Are they just repeats of old patterns? And maybe there might be some solutions in there which you hadn't noticed before. So in the practice you did you notice something new when reframing anxious thoughts? And it may have been a new angle. It may be a new way to see the problem. Possibly a different way you could approach it. Maybe you could see that, in a sense, you actually need to ask for help here. So I suggest you pause the video now and reflect on this question and the practice you've just done. You may wish to journal it, or you may just simply make mental notes, whichever works for you. In a moment, we're going to be moving on to our next practice, where we're going to be letting anxious thoughts just float away. Okay, time for another guided practice. This one is about letting anxious thoughts float away. Now, the goal here isn't to deny that we have anxious thoughts, but to allow us to separate from them and release them. As with all our practices, what you need to do is have your full attention here. Sit upright in your chair with your hips 2 to 3 inches above the level of your knees. Your feet are flat on the floor. Your hands resting on your lap without interlacing your fingers. You may close your eyes if you wish to, otherwise just gaze softly down toward the floor. And without changing it, become aware of your breath as it rolls in and rolls out again. And what I'd like you to do is imagine you're in a bright, sunny, serene spot in nature. Maybe it's a grassy meadow. Maybe it's by the banks of a softly flowing stream. And I want you to visualize some elements in nature, like leaves or dandelion seeds or butterflies or a flowing stream, that we can use to help you carry anxious thoughts away. And choose an object meaningful to you. As mentioned above, it could be a leaf, a butterfly, a flowing stream, whatever works for you, to hold and release your anxious thoughts. So with that selected, allow a situation or anxious thoughts to come to mind. And visualize placing anxious thought on the chosen object, feeling its weight and contours. Inhale deeply and slowly. And as you exhale strongly and deeply, you release the thought with the object into the air or the water, whichever is appropriate, and watch the thought and the object float away out of view. And what I'd like you to do is to repeat this process with every anxious thought that comes to mind at the moment. Just allow thoughts to come naturally. Acknowledge them. Visualize them outside yourself and release them. And I'm going to be quiet for a couple of minutes to allow you to repeat this process as often as you wish. And gradually let go of the most recent anxious thought. Allow the visualization to fade as we draw this practice to a close. Become aware of your feet on the floor and the chair you're sitting in. Wiggle your fingers. Take 2 or 3 deep breaths. If your eyes are closed, now is a good time to open them and become aware of the environment you're in. You may wish to make some journal notes on the kind of thoughts that came up and how you felt like after you released them. So this brings to an end the session that we've been working on with anxiety. Remember that you have a student workbook for practices to do during the week. In our next session, we're going to be looking at mindfulness for work and career. And if you have any questions, just head over to the website and there's a form there you can contact me with. Let's finish with our usual style of wishing all sentient beings well, including ourselves. Well, thank you for being with me during this session. I look forward to being with you in our next session where we look at mindfulness and its relationship to work and career.